Hi, good evening everyone, and a very warm welcome to this, the 30th Scotwest AGM. And as it falls on the 30th of November, happy St Andrew's Day to everyone. You will obviously, everybody, be aware that we're in the midst of a global pandemic. COVID-19 continues to cast a very long shadow on all of our lives. And of course, this AGM, along with many other things, has had to make the shift to going online, certainly. As this process is new to us all, I just want to take an opportunity to highlight a few things about today's meeting, certainly. All of the papers have, of course, been made available online for people to view. You will be given an opportunity to vote throughout the meeting, certainly either with the option of a proposer or seconder, or as a vote for, against, or abstain on the motion, really. Also, you'll notice on your screen there's a box that allows you to ask any questions. Questions on the agenda will fall round about in items 4 and 7. But it would be really helpful for people if you have any questions, really get them in just now. Don't feel as though you have to wait until the last minute to do that. Certainly, it'll allow us to kind of work our way through them so we're not really just swamped at any one time. Can I ask, first of all, for people, just if you haven't already done so, please, if you can, vote with the option that allows you to say that you've attended for the quorum, certainly, so we know that we are quorate. I see we've now passed the magic number of 15, so it's still rising. So we do have a quorum, certainly. So the number's still rising, but we do have a quorum. So we can now move on, certainly. The first item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting on the 25th of November 2019. There's, of course, the matters arising out of that meeting. The fact that we can confirm that we did appoint new auditors following the last meeting after a tender process. These auditors were Johnson Carmichael. Now moving on to the minutes, which you should all have. Can I have, please, a proposer for the minutes? If you hit the button, certainly, that's just the fastest finger first for that. So we do have a proposer, thank you. And can we have now somebody to second the minutes of the previous meeting? And we do have that as well. Thank you very much. Now I'll hand you over to Scott Holmes from Johnson Carmichael, who's in one of the kind of lower tier areas in the border. Certainly, over to you, Scott.
Thank you very much indeed, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. As was said, my name's Scott Holmes. I'm an audit partner with Johnson Carmichael, and I signed off the audit opinion on the credit union accounts this year. The accounts were in the papers lodged on the website for you to review in advance of this meeting. Important to say at the start that, as noted on page 3 of the accounts, the annual accounts of the credit union are the responsibility of the directors. We, as independent auditors, are responsible for carrying out an independent audit of the accounts and expressing an audit opinion on those accounts. Our audit opinion is set out on pages 4 to 6 of the accounts. It's a unqualified or the things we do, as it says in the audit opinion, when we are signing off on an audit opinion, we're not only saying that the numbers in the accounts, we're comfortable that they are appropriate and correct, we're also saying that we are satisfied that the credit union is a going concern, that its financial position, its future forecasts, and its regulatory position are all appropriate, and we're satisfied that it can continue for the foreseeable future. In the accounts themselves, I won't say too much, but perhaps one or two things to highlight. The first thing would be looking at page 7, for those of you that can see the accounts. That's headed up Statement of Comprehensive Income. So that's the income statement for the credit union. Things to highlight here. Great to be able to know an increased surplus for the year of 543,000 against 410,000 in the prior year. Particularly pleasing, I think, given the backdrop of the challenges of COVID and the still increasing bad debt provision in the accounts. And on the balance sheet on page 8, again, good news here, a strong reserves position increased from 8.1 up to 8.6 million this year. And the other two things I'd like to note there is the increased bad debt reserve, which I commented on later. That's, I think, a trend across the industry. And again, COVID has an impact on this. And the other point to note is that towards the top of the balance sheet there, for the first time this year, the investment in corporate bonds has been split out, just to provide a bit more clarity to show that as a separate line item in the accounts. There are notes in these accounts which tell you a bit more about the items in the income statement and the balance sheet, but I won't go through those in any detail. The last thing I want to say really is a big thank you to the Scotwest team for all their help during the audit. We had to do the audit entirely remotely this year, so we weren't in the Scotwest offices at all. So that involves a lot of effort on the part of the Scotwest team in sending us information electronically and also being available online to answer questions and queries as we go through the audit. So we're very appreciative of that. Nothing more from me, but I think the next point is questions on the financial statements, which I'm happy to take at this time.
Thank you, Scott. We do have a question through from Gordon, a member, who is asking, could you advise what tranche of funding shown in the accounts was received from the Scottish Government and what this was used for?
Now, Gordon, what are you referring to specifically? I'm just trying to find that particular reference. Now, is that the government grant that's being referred to? If it's the government grant income, then as stated on page 14, there were government grants received in terms of coronavirus job retention scheme grant income.
I would assume that probably is, Scott, what Gordon's probably referring to, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's saying it's a relatively small figure of 67,000, I believe, but I think it probably is the job retention scheme, which will have come through from the HMRC, not from the Scottish Government, obviously. As regard to what this was used for, I mean, probably the clues in the name certainly is to help to retain jobs during the kind of pandemic. I mean, Francis, do you want to add anything to that?
Hi, David. Yes. What I would say is that it's just the same as what everyone else has used. During COVID, we had to furlough a good number of our staff. There was up to about 19 staff furloughed at the beginning. As we moved out of the tight restrictions of lockdown, we brought more staff back to the office and more staff working from home, and eventually everyone was off of furlough. So the money that we received from the government was not the Scottish Government, it was just the furlough grant, and it was for staff who were furloughed during COVID lockdown.
Great, thank you for your question, Gordon. Do we have any other questions? I don't really see anything else coming up at all in questions. So that being the case, we shall just move on to the Chair's report now, certainly. I'll just go on really, I know you have the report certainly at hand, everyone, so I'm not going to go through it word for word, but just to kind of pick out a few kind of key facts. As of course you will all know, Scotwest is governed by a board of up to 9 volunteer directors. This of course was due to be my last AGM, however, having served for 2 3-year terms before them. However, in accordance with Rule 60.1, the board have asked that I stay another year, given the exceptional circumstances. Of course, I'm more than happy to help out. I'd also want to highlight in my report really that after serving 2 3-year terms, Stephen Wood, our Vice Chair, will be stepping down. I just want to really thank Stephen on behalf of the staff, the board and the wider membership. Stephen's been a great ambassador for Scotwest, certainly diligently hard-working director, and is a true civic-minded individual, certainly. I think it's worth highlighting that in the 6 years or more that Stephen's been on the board, I think he's missed 1 board meeting. So I think it's a record that only Alan Ramsey ever was able to beat, really. So you'll be a great loss, Stephen, and a massive thank you for everything you've done for Scotwest. I also just want to highlight the fact that through the year, the board were delighted to co-opt Jackie King onto the board in accordance with Rule 40.7. Jackie King will be an excellent and is an excellent director, certainly. We did hope to get her earlier on in the year co-opted, but given the fact that Jackie works for the NHS and was in the midst of COVID-19, that proved a bit of a challenge, certainly when we did. Of course, Jackie, along with myself and Barry, the potential new director, will be standing for election and re-election towards the end of the meeting, certainly. Moving on now to dividends, of course, the board reluctantly took the decision not to pay a dividend in the last 2 quarters, really. Of course, the storm that COVID-19 has caused has placed and is placing really strong headwinds on our operating income. And of course, this is a reflection on the money we're able then to distribute to members. But please be rest assured as members that we don't look at the 0 dividend as a default position. We will certainly be looking to resume paying a dividend as soon as we possibly can. However, I would advise that this will be done really when it's only really prudent to do so, really. With regards to strategy and our business plan, we are looking to, of course, continue to maintain the balance between savings, loans and dividends, with an additional enhanced objectives on investing in our social responsibility promise, and of course continual development in our IT and digital services. We view these as critical parts of our infrastructure, ensuring that we're ready for the coming years ahead. Of course, as we all know, the economic outlook continues to remain very uncertain, and of course our business plans do incorporate a flexible approach, which we are continually monitoring, really, to adjust to this very fluid situation and strange times we're in. Throughout the year, the board really were proud to launch last year our social responsibility promise. This is going to enable us to focus on and articulate Scotwest's impact on the environment, the community and its people. We now have a committee formed from all the key stakeholders, members, the board and staff, and we really look forward to working with them in support of the concepts and initiatives they come up with. Now that is the boring part that we have to do when I go through the regulatory compliance. Just to highlight this for the regulator, Scotwest, like all other credit unions in the UK, is dual regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority and the PRA. The PRA requires that each credit union's governing body will report to members at the annual general meeting in respect of compliance as follows. Depositor protection. Scotwest members are protected by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. This means we are required to comply with various regulatory requirements in respect of the deposits we hold. In accordance with the PRA Credit Union Rulebook 10.1, we can confirm that we are compliant with all the requirements of Depositor Protection 11, 49 and 51. Policy insurance. The PRA Credit Union Rulebook Part 2.10 requires us to maintain insurance to protect against any loss suffered or liability incurred by a reason of fraud or other dishonesty of any of our officers or employees. In accordance with the PRA Credit Union Rulebook Part 10.1, we can confirm that we have complied with those requirements. Finally, additional activities. The PRA Credit Union Rulebook Part 4 allows a credit union to carry out additional activities and provides additional compliance requirements. In accordance with the PRA Credit Union Rulebook Part 10.1, we can confirm that we have carried out additional activities of additional investments, additional lending and mortgages, and that we are compliant with the additional requirements thereon. Finally, it just really gives me a chance to offer my sincere thanks, first of all, to my fellow directors. Of course, as you know, we are a volunteer board. Directors give up a huge amount of their time to really help steer this organisation. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to the staff. Their ongoing commitment to Scotwest and to the members really has to be highlighted. It's been a really difficult year for staff, certainly with COVID-19. So I really want to offer a huge thanks to them. And of course, to you, the members, a huge thanks. As I say every year that I've been chair, we really do exist really just to serve you guys. Our success is very much down to your continued engagement with Scotwest. So please, as ever, if you're looking to borrow or any family member you do know, certainly please consider Scotwest equally as well with regards to savings, certainly do so. Now I shall hand us over to our CEO, Francis McCann, who's going to now take us through the CEO report, and then we'll have questions at the end. Francis.
Hi, David. Thank you. So I'm not going to read out my report word for word, but I suppose I really should start off with what everyone else has spoken about and referred to as the pandemic. This time last year, we couldn't even have imagined the situation that we're sitting in this year. For the team at Scotwest, like as did many businesses across the UK, we very quickly moved to home working. We started with a core team who were set up to start from home, and then we slowly expanded the home working team as the demand began to grow again from the members. Obviously, as we locked down in March, there was a complete drop-off in any kind of demand, other than perhaps the support that we gave to members around payment breaks and giving them the reassurance that, you know, we were flexible and working with them so that they could pull in their finances at that time, and a lot of people found themselves in difficulty. So that was the main part when we locked down. But as one of the surprising things that we didn't expect was that savings would grow so strongly during COVID. And obviously that is a great position for a good many members who were able to accumulate more savings during that period of time. But as I said just previous to that, it's different stories for different members, and they've all had different experiences. And as a credit union, we've done our best to be here for the members. Another record-breaking year for us with the Christmas savings account. It's rising year on year, and this year I'm happy to say that we paid out over £3 million to members in their savings accounts for Christmas. So that'll have put many of them in a good position, albeit it's likely to be a very different Christmas from what we're used to. Lending basically ground to a halt almost around about March and April, but slowly but surely has returned. It's not quite at the levels pre-COVID as you would expect, but we are still helping many members with their lending requirements, and our lending book has recovered back to the position it was in before COVID, and has even ended up in the year ahead of what we were last year. So it's good to see that come back for us. Reflecting on the performance, obviously, so the savings, we mostly get our savings through payroll deductions, so we've seen a decrease in withdrawals from our members during the lockdown, but again, that slowly but surely has increased. In terms of capital, in my report, I've tried to explain this quite simply. Many people who don't govern credit unions or work with capital might not realise the position that increased savings puts us in. When our income is reducing and our savings are increasing, then it does become more challenging to meet the regulatory requirements. But the team here, the board of directors and the management team, have continued to navigate our way through, and really happy to report that we have maintained our capital requirements and also a buffer on top, so we have been able to do that. And last but not least, I'd like to echo what David said. Scotwest is about people. You'll see under our logo, we talk about it's where people count, and we are absolutely passionate and committed to that in Scotwest. I would like to echo David's thanks to the directors and also to David himself. Our directors give of their time freely. They don't get paid for their time, and they purely come to Scotwest and govern Scotwest because it's something that they believe in, and they like to do their bit to help the members and give back to the membership. So we couldn't do the job that we do without people like David and the other directors who dedicate their time free of charge. So thanks for that, David and the board. And the team at Scotwest, I can't speak highly enough of how they have adapted to the circumstances. They have adopted home working, and the members are likely to barely have even seen a change in the service. So the team at Scotwest are fantastic, and they've risen to the challenge, and they continue to do so even now as we still are living with the pandemic, moving into next year, and doing everything that we can to support our members through the next 12 months. And last but not least, again, echoing what David has said, the members are the most important part. If it wasn't for members, we wouldn't have a credit union. So I'd just like to echo his thanks to the members for saving and borrowing, or perhaps doing a bit of both. And hopefully you'll continue to do that and give us your support. Thank you.
A question here in from Mary, who's asking if income has gone from 3 to 3.3 million, then why did the board decide not to issue dividends? That's a very fair question. Certainly, I'll make a stab at it myself to begin with, and then I'll see if Francis wants to kind of add anything to that. Certainly, the board certainly really took the decision really not to pay dividends, really just as a very prudent matter. you're right in saying that income did go up, certainly, but also so did bad debt provision. And it's been a very fluid year in terms of the finances of the business, certainly. We also felt that given the fact that we had been in receipt of furlough money from the government, certainly we didn't think it would be appropriate, certainly, to pay out a dividend, and given the fact that the regulators were pushing for banks not to be paying out a dividend, really. But generally, I think, as I said, our plan is to certainly resume paying as soon as we possibly can, but it was a decision really to be very prudent. Once you hand money away to members, certainly you really, as a dividend from our capital, you can't then get it certainly back in. And we did not know this year how things were going. It's been a remarkably volatile year, certainly. So do you want to add anything to that, Frances?
Yes, thanks, David. So yeah, I suppose what I would add to that is that income may slightly be up, but there were many factors that played in the decision, not least the fact that the Bank of England dropped the rate so low. And it is challenging, as I mentioned earlier, for us when we receive huge amount of savings and trying to, I suppose, bridge that gap. When your income is dropping and the savings are continuing to increase, you need to protect your capital position. So if we are paying a higher rate of dividends than what is prevalent in the market in terms of interest, that in itself could attract savings. So our strategy is not to attract bulk savings, but our strategy is to attract rainy day savings. So there's that. The furlough grant, the guidance from regulators around furlough grants to businesses was that you would not use furlough grants to pay dividends. Now, obviously, credit unions are not quite big corporations who are paying massive dividends to their shareholders. However, in the spirit of that, we didn't feel that it was reasonable. The furlough grant was to go towards the salaries of the staff who were furloughed, and we couldn't consider that either. We had also made some savings in terms of moving from the office. So when we put all the factors into play, including the prevailing interest rates and the forecasts moving into next year, it was felt the prudent thing was for just the last quarter of the year to stop paying the dividend. We had paid the dividend already for 3 out of 4 quarters for the year. So it was only for the last quarter to reflect the impact on the business. And for the first quarter of the year till we see how the start of the year goes, and then we need to take it at 1 quarter at a time. We're also living with the prospect of the Bank of England moving to negative interest rates, which may in turn affect whether we can pay dividends or not. So we are merely taking it a step at a time. So that's really why for the last quarter and the first quarter, the board decided it was prudent to not pay a dividend to see how the financials were affected. Thanks.
We have another question in from Gordon, really to ourselves, basically saying that a reference was made to additional investments, especially given the lack of interest being received on money deposited in banks or the financial markets. Can we expect to see more new additional investments in, for example, bonds of housing associations, or are there other investment initiatives which you are considering? Probably just in response to that, certainly I'd jump in to say that we are incredibly limited as to who we can invest with. Certainly, we, as much as we'd love to be able to invest with housing associations, our rules dictate that we're only limited to invest with UK deposit-taking banks. I think we are very aware, certainly, of the lack of returns from the financial markets. However, we do try and work with our allotted agents to try and get the very best in returns, but it's something that's generally affecting the whole of the sector. Again, Frances, do you want to add anything more to that?
Yeah, hi, David. Thanks. I think I would just reiterate that we are massively limited through regulations to what we can invest in. So we do have an investment portfolio, and we do use an investment manager. It's actually a bank that we use to manage our portfolio for us. And when we had a massive increase in deposits, because of the lack of return through bank accounts, then we did increase our investment portfolio. But we are looking out for opportunities, and we are lobbying the regulators for change in order to try and find other ways that we can use our money for our members and to get a good return for our members.
We've got another question from Kenny, just basically asking that a comment that I had made about the regulators pushing for dividend not to be paid. He's asking exactly which piece of legislation or regulation gives the regulator the power to do that. Certainly, I don't think, to my knowledge, there was any kind of legislation, that gave them the power. I think they were just generally, from my knowledge, certainly asking people to show constraints, certainly in the financial sector, about not paying out dividends if you are taking in the receipt of the furlough money. Again, Frances, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that you've answered that, and I think that it's more that it was guidance from regulators, and in terms of in relation to the furlough grant, again, that was guidance to companies because they were just wanting to make sure that companies would not claim huge amounts of furlough and then pay out as large dividends to shareholders. But yeah, it was more guidance and more that the regulators expected that boards would control their finances and try and balance, as we've talked about, balance across the savings, the loans, the dividends and the capital, just to navigate through the crisis as it changed day to day, week to week, month to month.
I suppose it was the ethical thing to be doing, certainly as a business, not to be paying these things out, really. Also as well, I think just to highlight to members, if they are concerned, I mean, the staff who were furloughed, we did make a commitment very early on to ensure that wages were topped up to receive the 100% of salary. I don't think we have any other further questions that have come through on the Chair's or CEO report, apart from just a comment from Caroline, just to say that can she commend the CEO for the impeccable service that she's continually experienced from her staff during and throughout this lockdown period. I mean, thank you, Caroline. Certainly, I think it all goes to certainly Frances and the team at Scotwest. I mean, her report basically highlighted the amazing things that the staff have been doing to help out 500 members who have been struggling in this really difficult time, certainly. So thank you. We'll move on now to the election of directors. Before I hand over to Scott, who will conduct these proceedings, just to really say that we have 3 vacancies to fill. The bios for all 3 people who are up for election or re-election have been circulated. So over to you, Scott.
Thanks, David. My understanding that these are just straight votes, is that correct?
It is, yes.
Yep. So the first person for election is Barry Douglas. So could we have the vote for Barry Douglas, please? Okay. That looks like everybody done. Yep, so that's 20 votes for, 1 against, and 2 abstentions. So the vote to propose Barry Douglas as a director is carried. The next vote, please, is for Jackie King. And again, if I could ask members to vote now, please. Okay, I think that's all votes in. We have 23 for, none against, and 1 abstention. So the vote for Jackie King is also carried. And lastly, please, a vote for the re-election of David McReiner. If you could vote now, please. Okay, I can see no further movement in the vote. So that is 24 votes for, none against, and 2 abstentions. So again, David McReiner is duly elected.
Thanks for doing that, Scott, and thank you to all members. Congratulations to Barry and Jackie. The board look forward to working with you going forward. And thank you to members again for placing their trust in myself, really. We'll move on now to the election for the appointment of the auditors, Johnson Carmichael. So if you look at your vote for that. So certainly we have passed with a resounding majority, only 2 abstentions and 24 votes for the reappointment. So Johnson Carmichael have been reappointed. Again, I want to just reiterate, huge thanks to Scott and his team at Johnson Carmichael. They really were dropped into the deep end this year, certainly, and have really worked tirelessly hard to ensure that the audit passed through really very, very smoothly. We have another vote to go ahead now on the rule book, the proposed amendments to the Scotwest rule book. As I say, you'll have this in front of you. So really, they're all very minor changes, certainly, really. So I'm just going to really open this up for votes on the rule book changes, really. I think that seems to be final. We have a unanimous 26 people have voted for the rulebook changes, so thank you very much for that. I think just finally, before I bring the meeting to a close, I just want to really offer my great thanks to John McGill, our Communications and Brand Manager. and to Toby and all the team at Attend to IT for their really hard work in arranging this. From certainly my end here, it seems to have worked really very well, has run really very smoothly, and we've hit the ground running. I just want to say again, wish everybody a very Merry Christmas when it comes. Certainly, it's great to see people getting their Christmas decorations up early, I think just to give us all a bit of festive cheer in these really tough times. But again, a huge thanks to members, certainly, and please do not forget, certainly Scotwest are always there for members if you certainly need us. But I look forward to seeing you all, hopefully next year's AGM in person this time. And that's us. And can I ask as well, if you're keen, please stay on the line. We're doing the lottery AGM afterwards. And I don't know, I think maybe hand over to John. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this year's Scottish Lottery Annual General Meeting. The format, a lot of the format will follow from the previous meeting that you were in, so you should know what we're doing. The first order of business is for an ascertainment of the quorum. So what I would ask is if anybody out there would just like to confirm that they're attending the meeting, and that will allow us to make sure there's a quorum and so that we can carry on. That's great, thank you. So we are quorate, that's great, so we can continue the meeting as is. The first order of business is for the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. The minutes, like all the other paperwork for the lottery, have been up on the website to view for the last couple of weeks or so. I hope you've had a chance to look at them. So I would ask now if someone, if you could vote to propose. That's great. We have a number of votes in for that. That's fantastic. We can move on to the seconding of the minutes, and you can vote for that also. That's great. Your vote is cast for that. That's fantastic. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the financial statements. Like Scotwest, the credit union financial statements, these were carried out and signed off by our auditor Johnson Carmichael, and they were the statements for the lottery to the end of September this year. The one thing that would jump out at anybody looking at the statements is the drop in ticket sales figures from last year. That is down to the lottery not running between April and August, so not accepting any ticket sales in April and August this year due to a technical fault. And that has now been fixed, and I'm happy to say that ticket sales for the lottery are now back to where they were at the beginning of the year, so that's good. Does anyone have any questions about the accounts? No, okay, that's great. We can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the report of the promoter. Just following on from the minutes of the last meeting, our bank account change to Barclays was expected, but has actually been delayed due to a licensing issue at the bank side of things. So that's being dealt with at the moment, and that's one of the outstanding issues from the last AGM. There's no changes to the prize structure of the lottery at the moment. So the prize structure will remain as the first prize of £4,000, second prize of £2,000, third and fourth prizes of £500, fifth and sixth prizes of £400, and seventh and eighth prizes of £300. We don't anticipate having to change that at any time soon due to the drop in income from the lottery. We have made a few changes to the lottery constitution, which we'll discuss later, and really just to bring about a little bit of clarity and ease of use of the constitution. But we'll discuss that later on in the meeting. Does anybody have any questions about the report for the promoter? No, doesn't look like it. That's great. Next item on the agenda is the election of auditor. In line with the Scotwest Credit Union, we are recommending that Johnston Carmichael be the auditor for the lottery. So I would just ask you to vote on that now for the approval. That's great, thank you. 90% of the votes cast have been to approve with one abstention. That's fantastic, thank you very much. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the election of officers. After the last meeting, 2 new officers were brought in to the lottery committee who, along with myself, are now standing for election unopposed at this meeting for the positions of promoter, secretary and treasurer. They'll hold these positions for up to 3 years, again, including with the credit union. We'll discuss that change later in the next, the proposed amendments to the constitution. The first vote is for the position of chair, which is myself for John McGill. So I would ask you, anybody attending, to please cast a vote for myself as the position of chair. Thank you. Thanks very much to everyone who voted. That's 100% of the vote, and that's great, thank you. Move on to the next, the proposed lottery secretary role. Standing for election for that is my colleague Daniel Sala, who works with me here at Scotwest Credit Union. I would ask if you can cast your votes for Daniel for the role of secretary for the Scottish Lottery. Thank you. Great, I think it looks like everyone has voted. Again, that's 100% of the votes for Daniel for the role of Secretary for the Scottish Lottery. That's great, thank you. If you can move on to the next votes now, that's for the role of Lottery Treasurer. It's my colleague who also works here at Scottish Credit Union, Ashley McCrone, who's standing for election for this role. I would ask you to cast your votes for Ashley now. Thank you. great, thank you. It looks like all the votes are in for that now. And again, that's 100% of votes in favour of Ashley taking on the role of treasurer. So we will now take up those roles for the 3 years as dictated by our constitution. Thank you very much for everyone who voted. And move on to the next item on our agenda, which is proposed changes to the lottery constitution. These paid changes have been up on the website for 2 weeks now, so hopefully everyone attending has had a chance to see these. They're fairly straightforward. There's nothing, we haven't made any particular major changes to the constitution. Really, simplicity. They'll simplify the language of it, making it easier to work with, and clearer and easier to understand. One change we have made to the general committee, which is the 3 individuals you've just voted for, is how they will serve a term of office with 3 years, similar to the Scotwest Credit Union Board. Previously, they were asked to rotate yearly, and it was felt that moving to a 3-yearly period for each of the members of the committee will bring a bit of stability to how the lottery is run. So unless anyone has any questions about the constitution changes, I'll wait a few seconds to see if any questions come up. No questions by those things, that's great. So what I would do is I would ask us to move on to the vote for the approval of these amendments to the Constitution. If you could vote for or against that now, thank you. That's great, thank you to everyone for voting. 10 votes have come in to approve the changes to the Constitution, and 2 votes have been abstained. So the changes to the Constitution will now go ahead. That brings us to the end of the annual general meeting for the Scotwest Lottery for 2020. If anyone has any final questions, I will bid you all good night and thank you for coming. Just checking. Don't look like we're getting any further questions in. So thank you everyone for staying on for this part of the meeting, and I'll bid you a nice evening. Thank you. Bye bye.